They said, "Come, let us build a tower that reaches to the heavens." It wasn't just a project of stone and mortar. It was the declaration of a new humanity that no longer needed God. Babel wasn't just an ancient construction site. It was the first symbol of rebellion etched into the ground in history. In the shadow of its ascension, man believed he could climb on his own, creating a structure that would outlast the heavens themselves. But the higher he climbed, the more fragile he became, for pride always rises on sand, never on rock. Isaiah warned that the day would come when every lofty tower, every exalted thing would be brought low. Yeshua echoed the same truth. The rain poured down, the floods overflowed, the winds blew, and the house that was built on the sand fell with a great crash. The message speaks not only of buildings, but of civilizations, systems, and even human hearts that trust only in their own strength. What rises without God will not stand, no matter how invincible it seems. The fall of Babel was no accident. It was a divine interruption. God scattered languages not because he feared human progress, but because he knew where boundless arrogance would lead, to the erasure of his name from the earth. In that confusion, the first skyscraper of pride crumbled, leaving behind a silence that still echoes today. This silence is the same we hear after every falling tower, ancient or modern. A silence heavy with the realization that we are not as strong as we believe. Look at our era. Concrete towers scraping the sky, digital towers rising in the invisible realm of data and networks. Babel never died. It was reborn in every empire, every city, every system that thought it could guarantee eternity with human hands. Yet the ruins of history whisper the same warning. Towers fall. Pride crumbles. And the God who scattered Babel still speaks. If the first tower fell by divine decree, what about the towers that still stand today? After Babel, humanity never stopped building its towers. Egypt built pyramids that still defy the centuries, proclaiming the glory of the pharaohs who called themselves gods. Babylon built ziggurats that seemed to touch the sky, offering worship not to the Creator, but to the works of its own hands. Rome erected columns, arches, and temples designed to engrave its sovereignty in the stone of eternity. Each empire believed it would be different, that its tower would not fall, that its name would be remembered forever. But today, they are but ruins, silent monuments to human pride. Isaiah 30:25 speaks of towers being toppled, rivers of destruction sweeping over seemingly unbreakable walls. It's as if the prophet saw not only the ruins of his own time, but an endless stream of civilizations repeating the same mistake. Jesus reinforced this vision with simple yet devastating words. Whatever is not built on rock will inevitably fall. Whether it's a city, a nation, or an empire, the sand of pride cannot support the weight of eternity. Every collapse is a sermon, every ruin a warning. The thing is, the pattern never changes. It always begins with innovation, greatness, and unity around a common goal. Society prospers, the tower rises, the people celebrate. But when God's glory is replaced by human glory, the structure begins to crack from the inside out. It's an invisible process at first, a spiritual crack that sooner or later becomes visible in the stones, in the streets, in the blood of history. The same wind that seems to sustain one day blows against it, and what seemed eternal falls in an instant. And when these towers fall, the world trembles. The collapse is never merely architectural, it is existential. When Egypt fell, the gods of the pharaohs were humbled. When Babylon fell, its ziggurats turned to dust and its rivers were diverted. When Rome fell, its arches and columns became tourist ruins, and each fall was also an announcement that history belongs not to man, but to the Lord of hosts. Pride raises, but the eternal brings down, and this cycle has never stopped. If entire empires have fallen, what about the modern towers we believe to be indestructible? On the morning of September 11, 2001, the world witnessed a scene that seemed to have come straight out of an ancient prophecy. Two towers that represented not only economic power, but also the confidence of modernity, were struck and fell before the astonished eyes of humanity. Within hours, everything that symbolized security, progress, and stability was transformed into smoke, dust, and flames. That day marked not only the collapse of buildings, but the collapse of an illusion, that humanity had built something that could never be shaken. Isaiah had already described a time when man's pride would be brought low and his towers destroyed, while rivers of destruction would sweep over them. Isaiah 30:25. Millennia later, the prophet's words seemed to echo amid the dust of Manhattan. Matthew 7:27 also resounded like thunder. The house built on sand falls with a great crash. No matter the engineering, the height, or the reinforced concrete, the spiritual foundation was missing, and without rock, no tower remained standing. What happened that day was not just a human tragedy, but a sign. It was as if heaven had allowed the cycle to repeat itself before millions of witnesses. The tower, a symbol of absolute trust in humanity, was toppled. The images of the falling towers were etched into humanity's collective memory, a reminder that what stands proudly must crumble violently. It wasn't just New York that shook, it was the entire planet. And yet, even in the face of such a brutal fall, the pattern continues. As with Babel, many interpreted the collapse as merely an accident, an attack, an isolated tragedy. Few saw the deeper signal, God's call for nations to recognize that the Tower of Pride never withstands the weight of judgment. 9/11 wasn't just about the past, it was a warning about the future. But there is one tower still standing. And the question is, how long until it falls? If Babel was brought down by language and the Twin Towers by fire, there is one tower that still stands. It is not made of bricks or iron, but rises invisibly above all peoples, the tower of the human system. Banks, governments, digital networks, mega-corporations, all connected, all built on the idea that man can rule the world without the Creator. This is the new global tower, erected not in the Mesopotamian desert, nor in the heart of Manhattan, but in the collective spirit of humanity. It's different because it doesn't have a single physical foundation. It's supported by algorithms, virtual currencies, artificial intelligence, satellites, and invisible cables that circle the planet. It's a tower we can't see, but which we rely on every day to buy, sell, speak, travel, and even think. Like the bricks of Babel, each new technology is added as a block to this invisible structure. And so it grows faster than any tower that has ever existed. But Yeshua had already warned, any kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. Matthew 12:25. This global tower has no spiritual rock, only digital sand. And with every economic crisis, every cyber attack, every social uprising, cracks appear in its foundations. It is like a giant building that, on the outside, shines with mirrors and lights, but on the inside is corroded. The illusion of solidity is its greatest lie, and herein lies the mystery. If the towers of the past fell as signs, this invisible tower will be the greatest collapse of all. Because when it falls, it won't just be one city that will tremble, but the entire world. There will be no cameras to record a localized explosion. There will be silence, darkness, and the collapse of everything we call normality. The last tower still stands, but for how long? Since ancient times, the prophets have seen this pattern. Every human tower rises to touch the heavens, only to be crushed under its own weight. Isaiah spoke of the fall of pride. Jeremiah wept over cities that exalted themselves. Daniel saw kingdoms rise and fall like broken statues. None of them spoke only of stones or walls. They spoke of systems, ideas, and prides that defy the eternal. And they all left clear warnings. When man builds without God, collapse is not a possibility, but a certainty. The sages of Israel repeated the same thing throughout their generations. In the Talmud, we find reflections that the world is not sustained by power, but by truth and justice. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, in the Zohar, warned that when lies rise like a building, the light of the Shekinah withdraws and collapse becomes inevitable. The tower may be called an empire, a market, a nation, or even a world order, but its fate is always the same: ruin. And let's not think that these warnings were only for the ancients. The same signs are before us today. Every global financial crisis, every unexpected catastrophe, every clash between nations is an echo of the ancient warnings. It's as if the prophets spoke from within the pages of Scripture directly to our generation. You are repeating history. The tower is growing, but it is also cracking. The most disturbing thing is that many ignore this call. They prefer to believe that the invisible tower, made of technology, science, and economic systems, is indestructible. But Scripture reveals otherwise. Even the greatest fortresses will crumble when confronted by the truth of the Almighty. The final warning has already been given. The question is not if it will fall, but when. And when the towers fall before our eyes, it's not just stones that fall, it's the entire generation that is forced to wake up. But have we woken up yet? On the morning of September 11, 2001, the world stopped. The towers that symbolized the economic and technological might of the greatest power on Earth were struck in a matter of minutes. Thousands of lives were lost. A city was in flames, and a nation was in shock. What seemed impossible before our eyes dissolved into dust and smoke. It wasn't just a human tragedy, it was a cosmic signal, an echo of Babel repeating itself in the very heart of modernity. As the dust still fell over Manhattan, many began to wonder, where was God in that moment? Others silently sensed that this wasn't just politics or terrorism, but a prophetic mirror of something greater. It was as if Isaiah, Matthew, and Daniel were whispering in the ear of the present generation, "You have built a tower to the heavens, and now the heavens have thrown it down before everyone's eyes." The impact wasn't just material, it was spiritual. For a few days, millions sought answers in churches, synagogues, and mosques. People who had never before knelt prayed in desperation. But as always, the fear quickly passed. The dust was swept away, the buildings rebuilt, and the lesson forgotten. Humanity returned to trusting in its own towers, its steel walls, and its digital ramparts. The warning was drowned out by the rush of modern life. But 9/11 remains like an open wound, a reminder etched in humanity's collective memory. It was an awakening, brief but real, that nothing in this world is untouchable. And yet, instead of learning, we repeat the same mistakes. Babel, Rome, Jerusalem, New York. The pattern remains unchanged, and the great question echoes in the silence of the ruins. If even those towers fell, which one will fall next before our eyes? If in Babel the tower was made of bricks, and in New York it was made of steel and glass, today the new tower is invisible. It doesn't rise to the heavens, but infiltrates every screen, every algorithm, every network connecting billions. It's a tower made of data, driven by artificial intelligence, supported by servers hidden in deserts and mountains. Its height is invisible, but its reach is felt. Never has there been such a global and silent construction. The pride that once built monuments now builds systems. Man believes he can recreate life with code, defy death with machines, and even replace faith with artificial logic. Every click, every message, every transaction, everything becomes a digital brick in a new Babel. It's the same old arrogance, but now disguised as progress and innovation. The invisible tower doesn't need to reach the heavens, for it has already invaded the depths of the human heart. The danger, however, is even greater. For while Babel and the twin towers could be seen, and their fall witnessed, this new tower is invisible to the eye, but not to the spirit. It shapes thoughts, dictates behavior, and controls emotions. It is the perfect prison, because no one realizes they are trapped. And as in Sodom, many celebrate this system without realizing they are walking toward the fire. The digital world has become an altar, and the altar demands sacrifices. And perhaps this is why the prophets warned that in the end there would be global deception, because the tower no one sees is precisely the hardest to topple. There will be no smoke, no rubble, but a spiritual collapse that will affect millions simultaneously. And the question remains, when this invisible tower collapses, what will be left standing? If you look at history, you'll see a pattern that repeats itself like a prophetic echo. Babylon fell, Rome fell, Jerusalem was burned, its temple reduced to ashes. The same happened to empires that seemed invincible until their walls crumbled before divine judgment. No human power, no matter how great, remained standing when it rose up against the eternal. Ruins speak louder than monuments. This pattern is not just historical, it is spiritual. The walls represent what we trust: economy, armies, technology, ideologies. Each generation builds its own walls of protection, believing them to be unshakable. But when the wind of prophecy blows, they fall like dust before eternity. What seemed solid proves fragile, what seemed eternal proves to be momentary. Such is the logic of heaven, which humbles the pride of men. The most frightening thing is that when the walls fall, there is always an awakening. People faced with the ruins realize that everything they trusted was nothing more than an illusion. It was like that in Babel. It was like that in Jerusalem. It was like that on 9/11. Tragedy exposes the human heart and shows that nothing made by human hands lasts forever. The collapse is, in fact, a call from the eternal, echoing, "Lift your eyes to me, not to your towers." And herein lies the mystery. If everything men build ends in dust, where is the wall that will never fall? There is only one structure that does not crumble, a foundation that cannot be shaken. Jesus said, "The gates of hell shall not prevail against it." But if this wall already exists, why do so many still choose to trust in walls that are already destined to crumble? If Babel was the first tower of human arrogance, the last is still being built before our eyes. It's not made of bricks, but of data. Not of stones, but of algorithms. It's the invisible tower of technology, control, and artificial intelligence. Men who once trusted in false gods now trust in machines created by their own hands. It's the latest attempt to ascend to heaven without needing the Creator. The prophets warned of a time when pride would once again reach the heavens. Isaiah spoke of the fall of all haughtiness. John, in Revelation, described a beast who would deceive the nations with signs and powers. We are facing a new monument rising, not in one city, but in all cities simultaneously. It is a digital global Babel, and its shadow already covers the entire earth. But like every tower, it is destined to fall. What is built on sand cannot withstand the storm. What is built on pride cannot withstand the hand of the eternal. The technology that promises liberation can become a prison. The network that promises connection can become a jail. And when this last tower falls, the fall will not be of stones alone. It will be of souls who trusted in it. And here is the question that few dare ask. This last tower has already been identified, but has it already started to fall? At the end of every fall, there is always a promise that remains standing. Towers fall, empires crumble, technologies turn to dust, but the word of the eternal cannot be destroyed. Isaiah said that the rivers will overflow on the day of the great fall of the towers. This image is not only of destruction, it is also of rebirth. For when the pride of men is brought down, a new fountain will open. Yeshua revealed this mystery when he said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." He wasn't talking about stones in Jerusalem, but about a living temple. He was pointing to himself, to the body that would be given up and resurrected. This is the secret that unites Babel, Jerusalem, and the end times. The true temple is not built by human hands, but revealed from heaven. The prophets saw rivers flowing from the future temple, healing nations and restoring creation. This river is not just water, it is life, it is redemption, it is the return of the presence. When all that is human is shaken, what comes from above will remain. The final code is not about destruction, but about return, not about towers that fall, but about the kingdom that rises. And so we come to the climax. If the towers fell at Babel on 9/11 and will fall again, there is one final question that needs to be asked. The true temple is already among us, but who recognizes it? Everything built on pride falls, but the true temple is already among us. Subscribe now to stay updated on the next revelations. Next episode, the third temple code, not made by human hand.